Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Linux and open source news show. And this video will be sort of a test to see if YouTube actually changed how they count their views, because myself but other creators as well have reported that they're basically halving the number of views, but also you still see the same number of likes, comments, subscribers and revenue. So do the usual comment, liking and whatever stuff, and we'll see if this actually is real or if it's just a problem in their algorithm, because it's YouTube. Anyway, this week we've got Germany overturning a decision to ask for more clarification, and this might open the door to ad blockers maybe not being legal in Germany anymore. We also have more potential leaks and rumors around a Steam home console, although as always, leaks and rumors, it's all lies. And we also have plenty of other stuff like the AUR suffering from a denial of service attack, we've got the GNOME 49 beta, and plenty of other things, including a paid service for Thunderbird being revealed in more details. And we also have this segue to our sponsor. This video is sponsored by Proton VPN. You all know about them. They offer you a end-to-end and zero-access encrypted suite of services with email, calendar, contacts, storage space, a little document editor, and now a VPN plus a password manager and more. But the VPN is what interests us today. If you ever need to make sure that your IP is hidden, that what you're visiting is hidden from your internet service provider, but also just maybe trying to bypass some region locking content, some age locked content as well, if you don't want to give your personal info to any government that placed age verification in place, well, this is pretty much the only thing that you can really use to do all of that. And Proton VPN is my VPN of choice. It's the one I actually use every single day. They're really great. They don't log anything, they don't store any personal data, and I personally trust them with everything that I visit online when I turn on that VPN. So as always, you've got the link in the description. Check them out. It's all part of your Proton account, but you can only access Proton VPN if you don't want all the other services. As always, it's free to start, but if you want access to more servers and faster speeds and more privacy protections, they have paid plans as well. The link is down there. Okay, so the German courts have been going back on a previous decision which could lead to maybe an adblock ban in the country. This would be the second country on earth to ban ad blockers, the first one being China, if Mozilla can be trusted on this. So there was a long-standing lawsuit brought by Axel Springer, which is a big German publisher, so a company that makes money from selling ad emplacements. They're also in Europe. Generally, some big websites in France, for example, belong to this company. The lawsuit was brought up against IAO, which is the company behind Adblock Plus, one of the most popular ad blockers. Axel Springer was pretty much losing the suit, but the German Federal Justice Court recently overturned a verdict that basically reopens the case for, as they say, further fact-checking. Basically what it boils down to is, do ad blockers go against copyright law, as in, is modifying a web page created by a specific corporation, company, or entity, is modifying that web page infringing on their copyright, even if it's just on your side, on your computer, for your own personal use? I think everyone sane would say no, but this is the legal system and the copyright system, so you never know. The issue is, if those additional clarifications on the previous decisions of the court lead to maybe re-evaluating or reopening the case and maybe even banning ad blockers in Germany, this won't affect just ad blockers. Tracker blockers would also be gone because they modify the contents of a page. Anything that changes the CSS of a page to remove cookie banners to give a better layout to a website, this would all be gone as well. Anything that helps with accessibility would be gone. Removing social buttons from a page would be gone. In a way, even password managers could be affected because they also change the visual aspect of a page by displaying their own buttons in various fields. Now, Mozilla published a blog post outlining why this is a terrible idea to reopen that case, that basically no further clarification is needed. It is insane to think that blocking ads would infringe on anyone's copyright. You're not modifying the page for everyone, you're modifying it for yourself. It would be like saying that skipping the ads when watching a TV show that you recorded or ripping out an ad page inside of a magazine would be copyright infringement. It makes absolutely zero sense. And as someone who makes most of their money from ads on YouTube, I am pro ad block 100%. People should have the right to block ads wherever they want. It's your computer, your browser. You should have the right to view the internet exactly as you see fit. And hopefully this reopening of the case doesn't change that in Germany and doesn't give ideas to publishers in other countries. Because yes, it's just in Germany, but if this ends up happening, if ad blockers maybe end up being banned in Germany, this will absolutely open the door for publishers to do the same kind of bullshit lawsuit in every other country they want. We do not want that happening. Now, it looks like the Linux kernel doesn't really have a plan to handle Torvalds' inevitable departure from the project in the future. Torvalds said that there is no need for formality around this transition process and that the person who steps up when Linus steps down will change over time. Basically, the next benevolent lord will appear naturally in the future at the point where Torvalds decides to go. Especially since a lot of decisions are made by the community and not just by Torvalds. The plan is, thus, to just let things happen and shape up naturally, which, as the register says, is very dangerous. I completely agree with this. Peaceful transitions of power in giant projects or organizations very rarely happen. And while the community can be a guiding hand, the community can also destroy itself for sometimes really meaningless differences and reasons. For example, the inclusion of Rust. This thing is championed by Torvalds and supported and dismissed in equal measure in the general Linux community. If Torvalds steps down tomorrow, what happens to that effort? Does the new benevolent leader support it or not? Is that work lost, and does this result in Rust developers completely abandoning Linux? Is that work maintained, but this enforces the fact that Rust is here to stay and some other developers abandon their maintainer positions? How does the community react to this? How do you make sure a company doesn't try to grab power through one of their employees, which would make other companies leave the project, or fork it maybe, or start a conflict that harms Linux as a whole? It is a difficult thing to plan for and to do, and of course naming someone right now, even though Torvalds could retire maybe in 10 or 15 years, would probably make things more difficult for other people, so it's normal to approach this carefully, but also Torvalds might not decide when he retires. This is all starting from the hypothesis that he's going to retire when he wants to, but sometimes life happens and you have to step down for reasons that you don't control. And in that case, not having a plan in place is going to be difficult. The community can pick a leader, but this also could lead to various conflicts and problems, so hopefully this doesn't happen to Linux. It is the biggest software project in the world, the biggest open source project in the world, and there are plenty of corporate interests, individual interests for desktops and servers and IoT and various architectures. This is all a hard equilibrium to maintain, and hopefully this doesn't implode when Torvalds decides to step down. Now we have more information pointing to a future Valve-made SteamOS-powered home console. A Geekbench result was spotted twice for a device called Valve Fremont, which is using a custom AMD CPU numbered 1772, which has 6 cores, 12 threads, and a speed of 3.2 GHz. So it's very likely that it's far too powerful for a handheld, and it's also not a codename that we've seen before, as far as I know, which means it's very likely not the rumored Valve VR headset. It already was leaked with its own codename. There are still some weird details around this. It's listed as running Windows 11 Pro, which obviously is kind of odd. If Valve was testing a home console, chances are they would test it under SteamOS, not under Windows. They put a lot of effort on that operating system, on Proton, the compatibility layers, the tooling around it, and even with developers and anti-cheat, they would not sell a home console running Windows. Still, this codename appeared twice in listings, so somebody's definitely testing the performance of specific hardware configurations, but it could also not be Valve. This codename could be spoofed quite easily by someone wanting to play a little prank. So this could just be some accidentally public testing done by Valve to see which would be the best performance to price ratio for a home console. This could be intentionally leaked to build up some hype. This could be a complete scam with someone just spoofing that name to try and get some people to talk about it like I'm doing right now. We don't really know. What's for sure is that I want to believe that this is coming. I do want a Steam home console. Yes, you can build your own, but they're always going to be bigger, they're always going to run a not specifically tailor-made operating system, and you're not building on one specific reference hardware point, which is much easier for developers to support. We've seen this with the Steam Deck. Some developers specifically optimize for the Steam Deck and provide specific fixes for the Steam Deck. It would be the same with a Steam home console, and so you would definitely get better performance, smoother frames, better defaults than just by using a computer with equivalent hardware running another operating system on top. Now, Ubuntu is developing what they call dangerous desktop images, which doesn't mean that they will attack you in a dark alley at night, but that they're packed with what they call leading-edge snaps on top of the daily development Ubuntu base. So it's basically a desktop ISO for testing the very latest changes in Ubuntu with all the edge channel snaps turned on. Of course, this is mostly for developers to test things and to work on the latest base and stack. Now, this combines with what they call spikes, which are 6-week-long development sprints, basically, where members of various development teams focus on one specific topic, which also means they're not focusing on their usual area of the Ubuntu desktop. The current spike, for example, focuses on the prompting client, so their permission system for snaps. Now, this sounds interesting in terms of organization. It's nothing groundbreaking, it's a development sprint with all hands being tasked to work on a specific topic, and so they're building the associated ISO to make sure everyone has the same base they're gonna work from. Pretty interesting still, because it means Ubuntu might start being a more focused distro. It sometimes feels like Ubuntu floats from desktop release to desktop release, using like the GNOME stuff, building some amount of snap-related stuff if they have the time, but it generally feels like they don't exactly know, or at least don't communicate well, what they exactly want to achieve. With these development sprints and this ISO, this might change. It might mean more publicly visible focus on specific areas of the desktop, and that's what you want to see from a desktop distro. Now, the AUR cannot catch a break, it seems. After the various malware problems that happened in past weeks, they are now having uptime problems. The AUR seemingly had daily issues over the past week, being inaccessible because of DOS attacks, so denial of service, according at least to one of the AUR's maintainers. It's apparently not just the AUR, but other Arch websites as well, and it's obviously not a problem of the AUR or of Arch as a project. They also didn't say if this was coming from a single source or from multiple ones. Apparently the issue was fixed in the middle of the week, the forums seem to report everything is fine, but the uptime robot for Arch seems to report some issues remaining still with the AUR, with the main website, so things might not be completely fine yet. Like, at the time I'm recording this, the AUR is down for more than 50% of users. Things might change by the time you're watching this, but this is not fine and resolved yet. It is always a chore to handle these issues. You never really know where it's coming from. It could be a AUR helper that is badly written or malfunctioning. We've seen this in the past with Manjaro's Pacman or AUR helper, which was basically DOSing the AUR. It could be some ill-intentioned people trying to attack and bring down the site. It could be bots trying to scrape everything on there. It's basically difficult to tell until you've actually identified the source and you manage to block it entirely with all its IPs, or ask them to stop doing that if you don't want to block them. Difficult thing, obviously not a problem of Arch and the AUR itself. They don't have any control over who is trying to DOS them, obviously. GNOME 49 got its beta this week, and it looks like it's going to be an interesting new version, if not the biggest version of GNOME we've ever seen. First, Nautilus gained a new search UI. The lock screen also got media controls, so you can pause or change tracks without unlocking your session, and Papers will now fully replace events as the PDF viewer, a change that was already announced and already in effect on Ubuntu, for example. As planned, Systemd will be the backend for session management in GDM. This will also have some impacts on distros that don't use Systemd, because they're gonna have to re-implement some stuff. You also gain per monitor brightness sliders in the quick settings. The webcam app now supports hardware video encoding. Gestures should work better, even though I can't say I ever had issues with these on GNOME and Wayland. Video recordings made with the built-in tool will use H.264 and MP4 when possible. The calculator app will gain a bunch of new improvements for scientific and math calculations. Maps gains more points of interest, and the desktop will also gain a notification to encourage users to donate to GNOME in the same way as what KDE did at the end of 2024. It worked really well for KDE, so no reason to think that it won't do the same for GNOME. Of course, distros will be able to disable that notification, and you as a user will be able to stop them as well if you don't want to see them. But also their new governance model should be in place by now, and so we're gonna see more transparent feature proposals, and we'll be able to know why they are accepted or denied, and this won't be beholden to a single individual maintainer maybe blocking certain things, which is something that has happened in the past on GNOME. It's basically going to follow the same process as Fedora, where the entire community can get involved, and when you propose something, you're gonna know why it was rejected and why people voted no on that, instead of just having a "it's out of scope" blanket answer. So probably going to be much better. That's what most people were asking of GNOME: more transparency, more clarity, and a more transparent process for submitting ideas and knowing why they are accepted or not, and that's exactly what we're getting. So GNOME 50 and later will be, I think, a bit more interesting to follow because we'll have a clearer view of what's going to happen. Canonical is looking to improve the current messy situation with ARM support on Linux. Currently, laptops or desktops using an ARM chip don't really expose all their devices like x86 hardware does. The latter supports ACPI discovery, meaning you can basically explore all the hardware and load the best driver or module at startup to handle each peripheral. On ARM devices, you need a device tree, which lists all of these devices, but this device tree isn't automatically exposed by the hardware. This means that if you don't have the right device tree file for the device you're trying to boot Linux on, chances are you're not going to have a great time. And Canonical wants to improve that by building what they call Stubble. This is a small UEFI boot stub, so basically a little placeholder bootloader, which has the purpose of loading these device tree files that would be embedded, for example, in a kernel image. This little thing will just generate a hardware ID for your device using the BIOS, and then look at all the device trees files that are present in the kernel image. If it finds ones that matches, it will load that, and then it will launch the Linux kernel itself, which will load the right modules. It's an interesting little thing. It means that hardware manufacturers, but also just the community, all they need to do is build device trees. I'm not saying that's super easy, but they need to build device trees for all their little devices, and then make sure that there's either a single repo where they're hosted on, or that distros can grab them and use them publicly and redistribute them, so we can just have an all-purpose ARM ISO that is able to boot in real time with any device tree. That would be pretty neat. It would basically sort of replicate the experience for x86. Now, speaking of ARM, after prominent members of the Asahi community left the project a while back, it felt like efforts to support Apple Silicon Macs might slow down, but apparently this isn't quite the case. First, there's a new driver under review in the Linux kernel to handle the laptop's SMC, as well as lid events, plus the various sensors present in these devices. This seems basic, but it brings the ability to reboot the computer instead of just shutting it down and manually restarting it, which is nice. It lets you put the laptop to sleep when closing the lid. It also gets the system clock, the thermal sensor data, the battery levels, the fan modes, the voltage, and everything around that, which will definitely help with battery efficiency as well. Pressing the power button can also now trigger the usual events, like bringing a menu, putting the laptop to sleep, or whatever else. And on top of that, there's also USB 3 support coming for M1 and M2 Macs, as previously these ports were just running at way slower speeds. It also includes some prep work for Thunderbolt and DisplayPort Alt mode, although these aren't quite ready yet. Apparently it was a big pain to get that thing to work. The USB 3 controller doesn't really send the usual events you would expect, and it needs to be fully reset with each new connection or mode change, so it doesn't look like an easy thing to make. This is still some pretty insane work done without any documentation or help from Apple, so it's all reverse engineered, and that's pretty impressive. Now, there are still a few things missing for these laptops, M1 or M2, to be fully supported, or even the little Mac minis and desktops as well, but it's getting very, very close, and honestly, just having USB 3 speeds and the ability to better control the thermals, or at least the battery efficiency of the laptop using the sensor data, is going to be a game changer for these laptops. And to conclude on this episode, we're gonna talk about Thunderbird. They shared more details about their Thunderbird Pro service. First, there is Thundermail, which will provide you with an email address. Just like you would with Gmail or anything else, you can get a Thundermail address. Well, you will be able to in the future. It will of course work using IMAP and SMTP, so it's going to work on any mail client, and addresses will be ending with @thundermail.com or @tb.pro. Servers are planned to be hosted in Germany, but they will expand those to other countries later. Second, the Thunderbird Appointment Service will let others book appointments in your Thunderbird calendar via a link and a simple web page. Well, this will be nicely integrated with the Email Composer window, so you can create those links and add them as you're writing your email without having to leave the email client, opening a specific website, creating the appointment page, copying the link, pasting it in your email. You can just make that on the go from Thunderbird. They also want to add multiple meeting types to that in the future, like Zoom calls, phone calls, in-person meetings, or whatever else, and all of them will have their own settings and rules, so you could, for example, have specific availabilities for a Zoom call and more restricted availabilities for an in-person meeting. They also want to add group scheduling to allow multiple team members to share their availability at the same time with a single link. Thunderbird Send, the big file sending or downloading service, is also moving forward, letting people upload large files straight from their email client. Thunderbird Pro users will get 500 gigs of storage to handle this, and file encryption is also planned in the future. This will work as a system add-on, it's not going to be baked into Thunderbird, so they can evolve the service separately. Of course, there remains the pricing part. Thunderbird says that they don't want to compromise the feature set of Thunderbird with paid features, so the current apps and the entire features that you currently have access to, they will remain free of charge. Thunderbird Pro will be entirely optional extra stuff. Now, personally, I don't have anything against these paid features. I think Thunderbird is already pretty feature-packed. It does a lot, probably more than most people would need, and more than most people get on a webmail, which is what most people tend to use. So having extra paid features on top of that for stuff that requires a server and a recurring payment to pay for the infrastructure, I think this is fine and totally normal. But also, let's hope this is well integrated. If when I right-click something, I get a specific option that is highlighted in gold or yellow with a little premium tag next to it, that's gonna annoy me. I don't want ads inside of my app. I want those optional extra features to be visible. If I click on them, it's gonna tell me, hey, you need to pay to have access to that. That's fine. But I don't want banners advertising it. I don't want menu options that I can't use or remove if I don't pay. And I don't want them to be super highlighted to try and make me pay. If this doesn't happen and the Thunderbird app stays the same with just a few extra options that when I click on it, it just doesn't work because I haven't paid and it displays a little pop-up, then I'm fine with it. If it's super highlighted and super visible, then that's going to be annoying. What is definitely not annoying is this segue to our sponsor, Tuxedo Computers. If you've been listening to this show for a while, you know who they are. They make laptops and desktops that ship with Linux pre-installed. They have a big range of computers that should suit every price point and every need. They have plenty of configuration options for the hardware, for the keyboard layouts of your laptop, for your logo, and a bunch of options for the OS it comes pre-installed with, although you can just slap any distro you want. They even have repos for the various small configs that you can add to make sure everything runs perfectly. I only rely on their computers these days. Everything you hear from me or see from me on my YouTube channel is made using one of their laptops, and I can only recommend them. The link, as usual, is in the description below. Anyway, thank you all for listening to this episode, or actually watching it if you did that, although I'm sure you just played it in the background while doing something unsavory. Anyway, you know where all the YouTube buttons are, you know where the comment section is. Do like, comment, subscribe, whatever else. We need to see if YouTube is actually halving the number of views, but if it has actually any impact. A bunch of creators are reporting this, so please do click the like buttons and whatever just to see if it works or if YouTube is getting crazy with the algorithm. Anyway, thank you all for watching and or listening, and I guess you'll see me in the next one. Bye!